Hi there. My name is Marissa. I am a mom of seven, and I have been getting a lot of questions lately about this idea that we do in our family called blanket training. Now, before we get too far in, and before you've already X'd out this video to move on, there has been a lot of buzzwords about blanket training, and I just want to kind of put to rest some of the differences. When we talk about blanket training here in our home, we talk about a completely different experience than that you might have heard on documentaries about Bill Gothard or I think that documentary called like The Shiny People. I'm not sure. But basically, when they describe the blanket training experience for them, they explain this horrible sounding event where you are training your child by tempting them to sin and then consequencing them for it. That is absolutely 110% not what we're doing here. So let's dive in and talk to you about blanket training the right way, or at least our way. And this idea of blanket training, I have personally used for all I have seven kids, but my youngest is 6 months right now. So my six older kids. Currently, my only toddler, my 2 year old, is the only one actually using the blanket training right now. But the cool thing, which I hope you'll discover, is that blanket training is a way to just help formulate self control, focus, being attentive to their surroundings. And that actually propels and goes further on into schooling, into environments where you'll find yourself needing those previous training skills. So let's dive in. So we call it blanket time. And you may have seen, if you follow me at Raising Rices on Instagram, I actually share a lot of pictures of the practical ways that we use blanket time, both in our own homeschooling, where we're on the go, and how that's worked for us, different toys and manipulatives that we've used. I have several examples here that I'm going to physically show you here on the video, and a lot more ideas in store. So I wrote out a little synopsis. I would love to read it to you so that I don't say it wrong. But blanket training is a method. It's a method used to teach toddlers self control by encouraging them to stay on a small blanket for a set period of time. The goal is to help the child develop patience and focus while also fostering obedience to mom and dad. There, we're going to go into 6 steps to help train your child for blanket training. Now, before we dive in too far, you may have heard me say the word toddler. Toddler, for me, kind of brings up a certain age range. However, I have learned from my dear friends at Be Courageous, Angie Topland to be exact, that she is very passionate about not putting an exact age, gender, or child on a trajectory that doesn't match with their abilities. So, while I use the word toddler today, I may give you examples of my 2 year old, or maybe some of my other kids started earlier on in their years. I want to say the earliest we've started is around, well, actually, I'll get into that in a minute. Sorry to burst your bubble. We'll get into how it looks, how to translate the younger age into older. There is like a season of time where you're doing different things that help them build that stamina up. And when I talk about stamina, what I mean is, let's pretend that you're learning to run a marathon. And would you just go out day one and run that marathon and be fully equipped and ready and successful? I surely wouldn't. But if I started training and I took small bits of time, and then I added more time to that, and then more time to that, I would get to that marathon goal and destination. Not right at the beginning, not even the next day, or even for me, the month later. It would take me some significant time to get there. But when I got there, I would have trained and been readied my body and my mind and my support system to be successful. So that's what I mean when I say stamina for your child. All right, so 6 steps. Step number 1, choose the right time and place. This goes hand in hand with the age that you start your child. It also goes hand in hand to remembering the needs of your toddler or your child. If their basic needs are not being met, like adequate sleep, adequate food, and nourishments for their bodies, they need to not be overly tired or extra hungry, or they're not going to be successful. So pick the right time, especially in these early formative times of training. You also want to make sure that you pick the right place. I call it blanket training because I use a blanket. Look at that. My grandma actually sewed me this blanket. It's a circle blanket, and it was for my oldest, my daughter, who is now 11. So this circle blanket has stuck with me for all of my kids. However, my sweet grandma did make me one for the boys that was blue and green. So we use a circle blanket. You can simply use a square blanket, but you want to make a very visual destination of where you want your toddler, where you want your kiddo to be. And I like to make it comfortable and inviting and fun because this is a very encouraging time. I don't want anyone to dread this time. I don't want it to feel dark and lonely. No, it's part of the community. It's part of the family that we're doing this blanket training. And this area that you pick does need to be free of distractions. For example, I would not put a TV on. I would not set my blanket out and start to begin blanket training, or even years into blanket training, turn on something like the television. Music is okay for sure. Other things like temptations to go and get things, are the goal is to stay on the blanket, to be successful on the blanket. And so making sure to have your mom eyes open or your dad eyes, and to see what might be distracting to your kid while you are training specifically. And then as they get older, what things kind of take away or deteriorate the beautiful moment of a blanket time. All right, step number 2. We need to introduce the concept. We need to introduce this blanket time to our kids clearly. We need to be gentle, always gentle. This is as coming back to the beginning in our introduction, where I mentioned that there are some people that follow Bill Gothard's idea where they will set the kid on the blanket and then put the toy right outside of the blanket. And as the child reaches for that toy outside the blanket, they'll spank the child on the hand. You're tempting your child to sin. That is not good parenting. And that is not God honoring and glorifying. So we need to be gentle. We need to be gentle with our child. We need to know that we are building stamina, so not have expectations that are out of control or lengths of time that are not conducive to the age and the ability of our child. And we need to explain using their words on their level. Get down on that blanket with them and say, hey, we're going to stay here. We're going to stay here and play. I personally, when I blanket train, sit with the child for the first extended amount of time. I sit on the blanket with the child to show them how to be successful, to show them how fun it can be, to show them what we do on the blanket. Because my words, although are gentle and encouraging, need to have the actions behind it at times when my child is particularly young, when I'm teaching them how to blanket train. We want to make sure always to use a calm and encouraging tone. I know as a mom, especially a mom of 7, I'm there with you. There is some frustration central that happens when we are training new concepts, or when we feel like we have trained and we feel like we have taught, and then it doesn't go the way that we want it to go. But that is okay. I really appreciate Paul David Tripp in his book, Parenting. He talks about this idea where instead of seeing the sin in our children's lives as a depression, as a disappointment, that's the word, disappointing feeling, instead let's reverse that. Let's change that and think, Lord, thank you so much that I am seeing this, that I can redirect them, that I have the ability to point them back to you, to point them back to truth. For if I didn't see the sin, if I didn't see the disobedience or the disrespect or anything, then that sin would go uncorrected and could take root in the hearts of my child and my children where they might think it's okay. So be encouraged that if there is a rough day, his mercies are new every morning. You can always try again. Be encouraged in that. All right. So make this a positive experience. Step number 3, we want to set clear boundaries. And that is the beauty of the blanket, is that there is a clear, distinctive boundary. We need to define that area. So if a toy is off of the blanket, not a temptation to get it, but let's say across the room, then that would not be a toy that would be able for the child to use during blanket time. We want to really make sure to set the boundary, say, these right here on the blanket, these are all of yours. Now, is this bad to limit toys? Absolutely not. I do it all the time, and I'll tell you more about that later. But let's also think back to the Garden of Eden, where God says, all these are good for you, just don't eat from the tree of good and evil. See, the Lord also puts those parameters and limitations and concrete boundaries for us. And it is good for us, even as a young toddler, to learn the boundaries. What mom and dad, their authority, say is good and what is not okay at that moment. So be okay with that. Be encouraged in that. Excuse me. You want to use simple phrases like, we're going to stay on the blanket. We're going to stay on the blanket. Now, I'm going to make sure that when I am encouraging you in this, mom and dad, is that when we use the word stay, or we use the positive reinforcement, like, we're going to play on the blanket, we're going to play on the blanket, they're not hearing another idea. They're not hearing, don't go over there. Don't do that. Don't get that special car over there, because then that's what they're going to be thinking about, that special car. No, you say, look at this toy on this blanket. We're going to stay here. This is our spot. This is going to be fun. All the encouraging things to direct their focus. Remember, we're increasing stamina in the focus. So we're going to direct their focus back on the blanket. All right. Step 4. And I've been talking about this the whole time, but I really want to reiterate that we are going to start with short sessions, short and small, and we're going to build and grow. So we're going to begin only with a few minutes, and we're going to begin gradually extending the time as they learn. You heard me a moment ago say that I sit on the blanket with them. I do that with them, and honestly, their stamina is like so much longer when I am sitting there with them, obviously, right? But after we've developed the boundaries, after we've talked about what blanket time is, with me sitting there and having the actions and the modeling, then when I move off, when I have them sit by themselves, I shrink that time back down so far so that it's a win. I want to have wins in the beginning. I want to have such short time that they feel like they're being successful. Maybe that's a minute. Maybe if they're a little older, that's 5 minutes. And then as they grow, as we practice, and we do practice, as we do that in the home, before we need to take it somewhere else, or before I need it for like a schooling time in my own homeschooling, I make sure to practice daily. I know that's a lot. It might sound like a lot, but you're going to see here in a few examples that this is a really something that you can incorporate into your day, something that you can incorporate into your family, and something that will bless you. All right. We're going to talk in a few moments, so I don't want to get too far into it, but just make sure that during your time, during the training time, that you have selected toys and activities that are engaging, especially as you're building the time for your toddler or your kid to do blanket time. If you pick things that are short-lived, that there's not enough opportunity for them, they will struggle, especially in the beginning. I am personally a fan of letting my children be bored. I think it's great. I think they get creativity going. I think they get crafts out, they play games, they do a lot of things in that boredom. But when I am specifically training how to do the blanket time, I am not looking for them to figure out what to do on that blanket. I want them to have all the things that they love, things that are new, exciting moments for them to be really successful on that blanket time. All right, number 5. And I feel like this is hopefully obvious, but I want to make sure to be very clear that we are to supervise and to reinforce what is happening. Supervise, let's start there. You're not laying the blanket in the living room and then leaving to go like somewhere else. Right? You're not going to take a shower. No, this is training time where you, the parent, and the child are a team working together. Not to mention, it's not really safe, especially depending on the toys that you have available for them. But it's also not really an appropriate expectation for your toddler to sit on a blanket while you leave. You want to be a part of it. Could you work up to the moment where, like, hey, I want to take a shower. And so I'm going to set up this blanket in the bathroom and I'm going to jump in the shower or in my bedroom while I'm right there and I have earshot what's going on? That would be my comfort zone. And you can get to that spot, but just not in the beginning, right? So you want to make sure you're reinforcing positive reinforcement, small praises, maybe small rewards when they stay on the blanket. Again, we're not bringing their attention to something else. We're encouraging them back to the blanket. And positivity, encouragement. Wow. I know my daughter was just doing it the other day and she built this big tower. And I just, wow, Gwendolyn, that is such a tall tower. I mean, it really was. I'm not like boosting her ego here. She did a great job. I was very proud of her. And do you know what she did for the next 10 minutes? She would knock down that tower and build it back up. And she'd say, Mom. And I would look and I would say, look at your tower. And I just remember that positive reinforcement just makes them forget basically that they're on this blanket, but also encourages them, making them feel part still of the community of the large gathering of your family. All right, last step, and this one is the hardest for me at times, is to be consistent. All right, be consistent with your verbiage, be consistent with your expectations, be consistent with redirecting back to the blanket, especially if you're in that like daily practice mode with your toddler. They need to understand the expectations and they need to understand that they don't change, that this is what is required and this is what we do every time. We stay patient as parents. And if we need to, dependent on your child's temperament or progress, you can definitely do that. You can definitely adjust because you're building that stamina. If you're having just some struggles for a week, just knock that time back down. Give some more success and then build back up again. It's okay to do 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's totally normal in parenting as well. Verbiage that I use when I am trying to encourage my children in general to obey, and this is a practice of obedience as well, is I say, we obey mommy right away. So like if they get off the blanket, oh, I hold their hand, we obey right away. We come back, right? On the blanket right away, all the way. So we're not having our limbs hanging off the blanket, in a defiant way. Oh, we stay on the blanket and we obey with a happy heart. So we're not going to be fit throwing. We're not going to be having a temper tantrum. We do this with a happy heart. And if I need to, I take them off the blanket and I'll bring them to like a timeout spot, or a conversation needs to happen away from the blanket so that they're focused and can listen to mom without being distracted about the toys and about fixated on the blanket. I will take them away. I'll talk to them. I'll coach them. I'll redirect them. And I'll bring them back to the blanket again. So it's not, I'm talking to you and now you're done. No, we always finish with success on the blanket. Very, very important. Finish strong, even if you're sitting there with them and playing with them. And then as they're playing, you just kind of, scoot a little bit off, watching them, but off the blanket. And then when you're done at blanket time, you encourage them, way to go. You did so good on the blanket. And then I call them to me. I'm like, let's get off. We're all done now, all done with blanket time. I help them pick it up and put it away. So that would be the 6 steps I would encourage you in the training process. Now, the next part I think is very important in training, and I alluded to it, and I just want to give you some practical ideas in it. And it's the quiet play activities that we have. As I mentioned, I don't lay out the blanket and expect my child to sit there with nothing to do. No, I want it to be positive, I want it to be enjoyable, and I want it to be special. So I have some physical items I want to show you, and I have a list here of different ideas of what you could do. When we think for a moment about the age span of blanket time, I would say in general, I will probably start blanket time as young as 6 months. Now you'll laugh because 6-month-old babies like Samuel right now, my baby, is not crawling, is not moving off the blanket, right? But what I do in those first couple steps is I will lay a blanket on the floor. I'll do this in my home. I'll do this at people's houses. And I will do it small group, for example, or at church if I'm in the cry room, and I will put fun things around him. I want, even though I know that he's so young right now, I want that association with being on a blanket and toys like to be a fun thing. I don't want it to feel like I want to grow with him. I want him to grow with me and I want to grow with him. So then when they turn a year, for example, and they are crawling and maybe they're even walking now, I still pull out that blanket and I'll set the blanket down like at family Bible time, and I'll put the toys out on it for them or their little Bible for them to sit and to participate. And I'll just help redirect them. But I wouldn't say my formal training of blanket time where I leave them doesn't really start until like a year and a half. And then at that time, since I do homeschool, it is very important to me at that time that they participate in our homeschool life and that they help be part of the team. And when I say that, I mean like when they're really young, I do a lot of holding, I do a lot of baby wearing, I do a lot of not necessarily holding them to an expectation of letting me teach, but I have them like just be an extension of my body. But as they get older, I want them to start learning that independence, that autonomy of play. I want them to learn that focused time. And like I said earlier, that self-control, very, very important. So some of the examples you'll hear today in the toy section, you might be able to say, okay, what would my child be successful with right now? And what kind of things do I want to start growing and collecting? I collect a lot from thrift stores, from hand-me-downs. I'm on several like like free pages, homeschool pages and church pages where like people, their kid has outgrown something. They're like, I don't need this anymore. Does anyone want it? I'm like, so that's an idea for you to start accumulating some things. Don't feel like you need to go out and spend money. So the first quiet play activity, and I hope you notice that word quiet. We're not looking for noisy games or sound machines. We're looking for quiet play for both the child and the actual toy itself to be quiet. Board books. So I have 3 books here that to show you. My mom is such a wonderful sewer and has made tons of these little fabric books. This would be something I would lay out for my, 6-month-old to a year and a half, just letting them soft play with it on their blanket before my formal training starts. And then when my formal training does start, I get a lot of board books out. So that when I start to look away, when I start to use the blanket time as my ability to like homeschool while they're being trained, board books, I don't have to worry about pages ripping on accident or anything like that. So I do have quite a good collection of board books that I really enjoy having for my like a year and a half old and older. And I would say I probably use blanket training up to age 3, 4, depending on the kiddo. Like depending, several of I should say one of my girls really like nailed the blanket training and wanted to be on the table, like on our homeschool table with us, doing her school time with us. So I moved her from that blanket to the school table much earlier than I did my boys. They kind of wanted to do some more like play. And still, when my daughter did move to that table, I had play type of things for her. But anyways, that's another That's another video. But when they get a little older, upgrade to some more engaging books. This is a flap book, where you open the picture and see what's going on. So things that can really keep their attention for much longer. They don't have to read the words yet because maybe they don't read, and but they can do this little lift, flap with flaps, lift and look. A bunch of Usborne books here, which I think they've changed their name now. I can't keep up. But also, some other ideas for books is if you go to thrift stores, as I mentioned earlier, if you do just get some books that you're not as concerned if something happens to them. We never in our household promote the destruction of books. I don't go buy books so that my child can destroy them, but things happen and I want to be able to put myself in the right spot that these are just things. They don't matter. And I want them to learn. I want them to learn how to turn the pages and to love looking at the pictures. And if an accident happens, like a rip or something, I need to not worry about that. I needed to let it go. And so I get certain books for that, for the car too, for an example. All right. I don't have one with me, but soft toys and stuffed animals, definitely for when they're young, and then building up. My 2-year-old for a while was playing with dolls, a little baby doll, probably because she had a baby brother. So things like that. Excuse me. The next one is very popular in my family, and that is stacking cups or blocks. I literally have just bought plastic cups, and I can't even tell you how long my child will play on that. It's so fun. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. My computer was dying. Okay, stacking blocks, stacking cups. Those are so fun, especially when they're young. We were doing this Sunday school class before church, and I think they were just like little sample cups. I don't know where I got them. Like the small, like, can you picture like the little Dixie ones? And my daughter, I had them in her little church bag, and she just stacked it, stacked and stacked, and unstacked it and restacked it. I did like 30 minutes. I don't even know where these cups came from. And she just did it. But as they grow, as they get older, they do need more of a challenge. So there are some things I've seen for free you could create. Like if you do get cups, for example, like can you build this type of tower and have a picture? You can just print them out. Pinterest, I don't know where you can find them, but they also have other things like this is a bead sequencing game from like Melissa and Doug. And like there's so many opportunities and options out there, but they come with little cards here, wooden cards, and you're supposed to match it. So like the orange and the orange, and then you put it on. But you could see there's multiple of these and ones in the back too. So they can work their way up when they get older to doing things like this, a little bit more challenging, more educational. And I have found by doing these types of games that it really actually prepares them better for school, that it's not like a mindless time, but that there's like goal setting and you're trying to accomplish a task. I've really enjoyed that. Busy boards or fidget toys. I think those are the fidget toys, especially can be really helpful if you're like having a bag that you're taking with you and your blanket to somewhere. The reason why this video actually is happening is because I shared a picture of my 2-year-old we were at piano lessons, and I had her blanket out and I had her toys, and she was staying on the blanket and doing a wonderful job. And I just shared a little bit about that. And people had more questions about like blanket training. And so I just get a little bag, like grocery bag size. I roll up the blanket and put some toys in it, and then off we go. It's really a great tool. You could also, as they grow older, get some more like fine motor activities, especially on the go, like a paper coloring book and some crayons are really helpful. If I am at home and I want to encourage my toddler in coloring, I don't have them do it on the blanket. I have them do it at the table, but it is something that you could do. Sticker books. We've gone to Dollar Tree and bought several sticker books when we do our long car rides. And you might be thinking, wait, what does car rides have to do with blanket training? Well, when you are developing a skill like focus, a skill like self-control and being able to entertain yourself for an extended amount of time, that skill isn't just used on the blanket. It's used in many facets, and that's what we have learned and experienced in our household. Some other idea is I lacing activities, pre-sewing activities. You can do that with just like a shoestring. There's a tongue twister for you. And there's some really cute ones out there. Again, you can pick some up at Dollar Tree or bead threading. Now, these are older, especially the bead threading. I wouldn't put beads out for my 2-year-old to do without my direct supervision. I would never leave my 2-year-old in the other room with bead threading. But let's say you have an older kid, maybe 3, 4, and they have been doing blanket training for a while. And so you want to bring this activity with you somewhere, or you have it next to you while you're doing your homeschooling, that type of thing. Sensory play. Lots of moms are very good at sensory play. I particularly am not, but I always see their ideas and think it's fabulous. Like felt boards with shapes on it, that like tactile feeling of the felt. It could also help if you have a creative child that likes to dramatize things. Sensory bottles, I think, are very interesting. Where you put like a bunch of stuff just in like a water bottle, like a disposable water bottle. You just put a bunch of stuff in there, and then you can even make a card, and it will say like 2 red buttons, and with the picture since your child cannot read yet, and then they have to turn the bottle to find it. The only thing about these sensory bottles is that they can be kind of loud. And so I would be careful with that because remember our goal is quiet. And Play-Doh, I've seen people do Play-Doh. Again, my own personal feeling on Play-Doh is it needs to be done at a table, and I have little mats. I think that these are probably just revealing my own like lack of control in certain situations that I need to combat because I will feel out of control and feel the frustration growing. But you're just getting to know me a little bit. Simple puzzles and sorting games. Oh yes, I brought a puzzle here to show kind of the progression. These ones, again, I guess these are also Melissa and Doug. These were all given to us by a family with older kids that just didn't play with them anymore. And matching puzzles, big chunks. You could also play with them. Super fun. And then as they get older, I have also gotten some like they're kind of preschool, which I would say probably, like 3 or 4 as they're getting older. But this is I should show you it this way. A matching letter. You put the card up here. And then if you just take this little flap down, it will say like bowl, BOWL. And then the child has to find the letters and put them there. So that's been fun. Definitely, like I mentioned, I really wanted to find things that were educational, that were inspiring, that were challenging for my kids as they grew older in blanket time. Because one of my I have a lot of main goals with blanket time, but one of the things that I found that was so helpful to me as a homeschool mom was that after they had been practicing this self-control, this focus, this, independent time, that they were able to then transfer into homeschooling when we got to kindergarten and we did a little bit more formal things. They just transferred so much better. And especially that year before homeschooling really kind of takes off for them, they come up to the table and they get to do some of these activities, but they're the same activities from the blanket, but they're just a little bit more challenging and they're on the table. And so they practice on the table before school starts. So that's kind of how we've done it. There are some great flashcards, matching cards, things like that, to have in your mind too as they get older. Shape sorters can be really fun. All the triangles here or all the reds here. Those things are great. Music and learning, definitely. There's a lot of opportunities to use toys like that. Just caution for the noise, but I do like to have some music playing, as I mentioned earlier as well. So the last 2 things that are just popular right now for my 2-year-old girl is the little coloring magnet thing, and then you just clear it off. Yep, there you go. If you can see that on the video. And then remember I shared the tower story. These magnet tiles have been popular with all of the children. They magnet together. You can make and create all sorts of things and houses, rockets, all the stuff. They're pretty affordable. You can find them on Amazon and they stack up so nicely. Like, let me just tear that apart real fast. They just stack up really nicely so they don't take up a lot of room, and you can put them in a bag to take with you. So, magnet tiles, we really like those. Okay, so a few helpful hints when it comes to toys. First of all, get items, get toys, get fun things that they don't always have access to. This is very, very helpful when you're trying to increase the excitement of blanket time, to have some toys, some things that they don't always play with every day. Also, to rotate your toys. I do this in general. I have like boxes where I will say, okay, well, we'll get out this box today, and there's just new stuff in that box. And the next day we'll get out a different box. And also, don't overwhelm your child with options. Remember, you want all of the toys to fit on the blanket. It is blanket time. And so if you have too many toys, there's no room to play. Also, if you have too many options, like, where do you start? So I would say, like, a rule of thumb, like 3 to 5 options. And then if I see that my child is, faltering a little bit because maybe they're bored with some of the options, I'll grab something else and an excited, thrilled voice. Look, you've been doing so good on the blanket time. I want to give you this to play with. So that's a helpful hint. Also, as a reminder, we are encouraging a sitting play. So with my boys, I remember getting them like their Hot Wheels out because they loved the cars, and drive these cars all over. Well, they want to drive them right off the blanket as well. So make sure that if you're going to do something like cars, maybe you include a track, like, so the cars stay on the track. Or they had this one when my son Jesse was 3. When he was 3, he got a traumatic brain injury, and he wasn't supposed to like get off the couch. He was supposed to sit and rest. You know how hard that is for a 2 to 3-year-old. Thank goodness we've been doing blanket training at that time. But they have, these little Matchbox Hot Wheel things where it was a car wash station. It was all in one little box. So try to get creative like that. And just remember, that idea of trying to be in a sitting position. All right. Well, what I wanted to finish up with today, hopefully this has been really helpful. If not, I apologize and thanks for watching. But I want to give you an example, a couple examples, real life examples of how you could train blanket training into your day. One, how you could do it if you don't have any older kids. And 2, some of the ways. So after I talk about that, I want to talk really quickly about some of the ways that blanket training is used within our home, and some of the ways we use it outside of our home. And I hope that's really inspiring for you to finish up this video. So a sample toddler schedule with blanket time would be that, you start your morning off. I wrote some notes here, so sorry if I'm looking down. You start your morning off, you do your wake up and get ready for the day, maybe have breakfast. And I would start, before I considered blanket time, I would start with a large motor activity. Maybe that's free play or outdoor play, or you go on a walk with your toddler, or something moving the body. And then I would consider, and maybe that'd be like, like 7 to 9. I just wrote sometimes, just bear with me. And then I would try out the blanket training. I would start, like I mentioned earlier, 5 to 10 minutes, not too long at all. Very in the beginning, I would sit with my toddler and encourage them in that way. And then I would, slowly back up and let them finish strong. I would choose also maybe some quiet activities like books or puzzles or coloring to do with them. And then, like I mentioned, just maybe back off a little bit and let them try to be successful for the last couple minutes of that time. And then after you've done your blanket time, I would move in like 10 to 11 ish. I'd move into like an activity time. And maybe that activity time would be paired with a snack. Like, for example, maybe we'd have do a little playing or a little craft and a little snack. I think that, like I mentioned way in the beginning, that making sure all of your needs are met, you're not being too tired, you're full, your tummy's full, all those things. So if you want to do the snack before the blanket time, totally understandable as well. And then after that activity time, maybe 11, 12, maybe before lunch, we'd do another like active play, maybe outdoors, the playground, dancing around to music, just burn off a little bit of energy before lunch. Then I would do lunch. And after lunch for our family, and I did this even when I didn't have older kids, we would move into like a quiet time, nap time scenario. So we would do lunch, maybe 12 to 1. I'd include my toddler in making the lunch, and we would clean up. We'd always clean up as a family after lunch and then move into quiet time, which is usually around 1 to 3. I actually do most of my things right now during quiet time, and I still have numerous amount of children of different ages. So quiet time, give them what they need and put them to bed. When they get out of that napping stage, I still do quiet time. Maybe I should do a video about quiet time, but still I give those books. I only limit it to books. I don't give any toys during quiet time, and I can have music going. But my olders, like I have an 11, 10, almost 9-year-old, 7-year-old, and 6-year-old right now. They all do their school reading during quiet time, like their independent self reading. And so I try to start that trajectory when they're young. Blanket time and being able to be self controlled, to be quiet, to be focused, right? Those things, those traits go in with quiet time. They start practicing those skills even while they're still taking naps, so that when they do transition out of nap time and into quiet time, they have some of the skill set to do that. All right. So then after blanket time, excuse me, after nap time, I would wake my kid up, and I would, depending on the age, I would actually try another blanket time in the afternoon. I would do it with new games, new toys and activities, same amount of time. I might do it a new location. Because I have older kids, most of my blanket trainings happens in our schoolroom or in our living room. And those are the two main areas that we do blanket time. And so then I try to train in those areas. But that would be a thought for you. Where would I utilize my blanket time within the home? And let me try to then train in those areas. And then some free time, maybe some errand running, dinner, and bedtime. So that was a sample schedule that you could do if you just had a toddler right now, or a toddler and a baby even, this would be really helpful for you. Just kind of think, oh, how can I schedule my day in that way? So tips for success before I go into where we use our blanket training time in our own home. First, again, please just start with like 5-10 minutes max. Like start really low, slow and steady wins the race, right? And gradually extend it. You want to be successful. You don't want to burn out too early. Keep the activities engaging, but also calm, like that noise level I told you about. You kind of really want to keep the things calm. Too much excitement, might make it hard for them to practice that self-control, that focus. Be consistent and flexible. That kind of seems like an oxymoron, but just be consistent in your verbiage, in your encouragement, in your boundaries, and then be flexible because every toddler is different. So what works for one person might not work for another. God picked you to be the mom of your toddler for a reason. You know your child like no one else. And you have prayed for that child, you have nurtured them, and you're bringing them up in the admonition of the Lord. And so you are the right one for the job. You are going to be able to see things and know things and understand things about your child and their needs to help them be successful. So be flexible. Don't do it verbatim like I'm saying or like someone else is saying if that doesn't work for your family. You are the mom, okay? And then always praise them for staying on the blanket, positive reinforcement, not bringing attraction with the don't do to other things, but the yes, yes, do to the blanket. I'm not a mom who thinks it's wrong to say no. I say no a lot. In fact, sometimes I say no just to practice obedience. But in this situation and in the training, really having that positive reinforcement, that focus on the yes, on the what you can do can be really helpful. All right, so within our home, this is the last little bit. Give you a little glimmer of what blanket time can look like. In our home, we use blanket training the most for homeschooling. As I mentioned, I have a sixth grader, and I have a fourth grader, a third grader, a second grader, and a kindergartner. And so mom really needs to have attention for those kids, but I still have a toddler. And I have a baby, and they are very valuable and important as well. And while I'm homeschooling, I want to set them up for success and my older kids up for success as well. That did mean I had to actually train my older kids again what they need to do when the toddler is on blanket time to make sure that they weren't engaging with the toddler because they love to play with their sister, which is so sweet, but they need to be doing their school. The other really big area we use it within the home is during family Bible time. Our family does family Bible time in the evening where my husband will read scripture, we'll sing songs, we'll have good conversation about what we're learning. And it can be a time, especially because it's so close to bed, it can be a time that is difficult for my toddler to focus. We started in the very beginning holding our toddlers or our babies during family Bible time. And then we transition them to the blanket where we sit next to them and show them how to sit and how to participate in family Bible time. And that transitions us into church. We have our children sit with us in church, and they know how to do that because they've been practicing in other forms at home. Remember, if you're looking at the church, we meet on a Sunday morning once a week, but we have family Bible time 6 to 7 times a week. So they get a lot of extra practice in before that Sunday morning. And then another place that I have recently felt like, wow, this is really helpful is in the home. We use our blanket training time when we are doing hospitality, when we have company over. There can be a great opportunity for conversations with the adults, and the older kids kind of run and have fun. But for my youngers, I still like to keep them in and close. And so the blanket with some new special toys near me while the adults are talking has been very helpful. I also mentioned earlier that some people that I know use blanket training when they need to take a shower, when they need to make a phone call, when they have someone unexpectedly come over and need to talk to them. So those are all kind of additional ways you can use it within the home. The exciting thing is that blanket training doesn't just have to remain at home. It can actually be transferred into many different locations. We use it at church, whether that is Sunday school time or in the cry room if I have to bring out my toddler because my baby needs to be fed. We also use it in different Bible study classes at church and in our small group at church. When we actually sit, we sit in the chairs at church, but that practice of blanket time is still able to be used on a chair as well. Other places that you might find that the skills of blanket time get to be used is if you have appointments, like a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment. When we go to the dentist, we have 9 of us that go at once and we're there for several hours. And so the blanket time has been really helpful in like the lobby. Plus, I am able to set it down and my toddler is not touching all the things, they're just on the blanket. Doctor's appointments, if they have to sit on a chair, sometimes I will, in the beginning, bring the blanket, set the blanket on the chair so that they associate that blanket with this chair in that moment. Other places that we've also used it is if we're going to somebody else's home. Again, whether they're having us over for hospitality or we're going over to serve for something. The blanket is really helpful for my younger kids to have them stay near me, where again, my older kids have been trained to go off and play. I still like the youngers, the littles, to stay near me. All right. I hope this was helpful, guys. I'm just looking at the time and noticing that I've been chatting for a while. I really wanted to be thorough because a lot of you guys had great questions. I hope I was, but of course, I know I probably forgot So many things. So, if you have questions, leave them in the description below in the comment section, and I will try to get to them all. And if I need to do a follow up video, I'm happy to do that. I really hope today that you heard that this blanket training is different. I believe it is different from the consequence blanket training method that I have heard others talk about. I really hope that you heard that this was a positive for the child. It's positive for the family. And when you work a muscle, when you're at the gym working that muscle and it hurts, I am so sore after I work out, but I'm building that muscle. And sometimes it's hard, but that hard results in something good. So if there are some struggles, just know those struggles can be overcome with prayer and patience and practice. Never forgetting you're the parent. You know what's best for your child. But yeah, I hope this was encouraging. Be blessed and make sure to subscribe if you don't mind so that when new content comes out, you'll be notified. And if you would like to share this with others, I would be so blessed so that we can keep on with our mission about raising households that serve the Lord. All right, until next time.